When the Fina update dropped, I expected a small event story that's kind of like a little side story of Fina, unvoiced, some small silly little fun thing. And honestly, what we got was a story that was both heartwarming and very in character thematically for Fina, and a story that is quite thought-provoking on what it means to be human, which actually also left me with a lot of questions rather than answers. So with that, I'll be discussing quite a bit of spoilers, although I'm not going to go into like the super details of the story, but I'll mention that just in case. And without further ado, let's discuss! The story starts off with Outsider approaching us to get a little favor. He wanted to let Fina have a little bit of time to go explore the outside world, so to say, because since the beginning we've been introduced to Fina as a sick little girl who hasn't really gotten a chance to really live her life because of her illness. And also because of her weak constitution, Outsider is very worried of letting her out because many things can happen, and apparently she has a bit of a complicated past. So with all these factors, and then it'll feel really weird if Outsider just like tails Fina around town even though he is the one that lets her go around. So we're the one looking after Fina for Outsider instead. Which here is where we actually switch over to Fina's point of view. We're actually exploring the Miss Akin area as Fina, and being able to interact with all the other characters around the area as Fina herself, rather than our main character. I personally really like this method of storytelling because I feel like it's very effective and really lets us get to know the characters, rather than just like looking at them through the eyes of our MC, so to say. And it's also really funny looking around at like cutscenes or whatever, and then you see our character like standing behind the trash can just like peeking at Fina or something. It's really cute. Day 1 starts off with Fina meeting with 3 of the neighborhood's kids, which apparently thinks that Fina is a vampire because they never see her leave the house. Which these kids teaches Fina how to play a little game called the Greedy Gobbler, which is effectively the Duet Night Abyss's world version of hide and seek. But the first round actually didn't go well at all, and Fina couldn't find anyone because she kind of ended up just getting distracted by all the sights and sounds and people everywhere. Because, well, again, she never really got to go outside her house, so everything's kind of new to her and it's really overwhelming. And surprisingly, the kids are actually really nice because they didn't like bully Fina for it or anything, but rather they actually just encourage her to keep trying again because it's fun. And honestly, this is where Fina kind of cheats a bit and starts using her magic of sorts to summon a dog. Specifically a spirit flaming dog that can teleport and also has a really good sense of smell, so he can actually help track them down. So with the spirit's help, Fina finds all 3 kids easy. And that's basically the end of the first day. Fina actually made some friends. Awesome! Day 2 had Fina going dumpster diving with Margie. And then she ends up finding a little bit of some weird stuff like, oh my god, there's some like kidnapping going around. And then there's like the secret bases of the kidnappers, which is actually right outside of the Ice Lake City. Although personally I found this part like really funny because Margie's like, oh my god, Outsider's little kid is like sick and weak and everything. What should we do? Oh yeah, totally bring the sick child to dumpster dive. Totally, what could possibly go wrong? There's like no bacterias around the trashes or anything. What if she gets infected? What if, well, I mean, that's probably like super too much real world logic, but still, it's kind of funny to me. And then that's kind of basically the end of the second day, which here comes the third day. And this is where all the meats and potatoes are of this quest and story as a whole. Which, by the way, I'm very glad that I decided to not do it day by day and actually just like binged it all at once, because I feel like the story wouldn't hit me as hard if I actually played it day by day, because I feel like the lack of continuity here actually might hurt it a little bit, but maybe that's just me. Anyhow, on the start of day 3, we are met with a new character named Cassandra. And honestly, Cassandra is probably one of my favorite NPCs that we've got in a while. She's a kid from the inner city, which apparently her entire class came out on a field trip to the outer city to the Gallia Theater. We are introduced to Cassandra at first as someone looking for a Charon that can use magic. We don't know her exact objectives, and us the MC got really suspicious of this girl, of what she wants with Fina. However, Fina herself, being a judge of character, saw that Cassandra actually didn't mean any harm and genuinely wanted help. So even after our character kind of shooed Cassandra away, Fina encouraged us to approach and find Cassandra again and really ask her what's going on. Here we learn that Cassandra heard that Charons can actually use some form of magic. She wanted to find someone who can use magic because she wanted to help a certain friend who's looking for a butterfly fairy. We learned that this kid's parents got into some form of an accident that got them killed, and now that he's an orphan, and then he's been kind of down and bullied by the other kids, and simply Cassandra just wants to help cheer him up. Cassandra obviously thinks this is kind of really silly because, you know, who believes in all those fairy tales and stuff? But upon learning that Karans can actually use magic, she thought maybe it's possible for a Karan to use some form of like magic to summon a butterfly spirit of sorts. And all of this is for just cheering up her little friend. Fina, being the girl she is, really wants to help out, so she goes ahead and practices for 3 days how to summon a butterfly fairy. So when it comes day to actually meet up with Cassandra's friend, apparently this friend named Savio recognizes Fina, which causes Fina to have a bit of a reaction and runs away. Here we learned the truth that Savio is actually Fina's little brother. They share the same biological mother, which means that Fina was actually someone originally from the inner city. Which there might have been some answers in like the Sojourns or their character profile pages, but I haven't read them yet. But this also gave me a lot of questions, like what happened exactly to Fina and what's exactly her, you know, relationship with Outsider now. But that'll be something I'll read up on in the future. So anyways, back to the story. So after Fina ran away, Cassandra and Savio wanted to go find Fina once again. So they go around town trying to find Fina. However, while all this is going on, Cassandra actually didn't notice that Savio was completely gone. So Fina and Cassandra together enlist the help of the kids from the first day to help find Savio. And they are really good options to help as well because they're masters of hide and seek after all in the city. They know the locations and alleys of the city in and out. So we eventually learned that someone saw Savio heading towards the gates of the city, which now reminds Fina of the case of the kidnappings which she found clues of from the second day. So you, Fina, and Cassandra all go together to the outskirts of the city to find the base of the kidnappers. With us not being so sure of how big the scale of these enemy bandits are, our MC instructs Cassandra to go back into the city and call for the security bureau. Bureau? I think it's called like the security bureau. That's the proper pronunciation. Anyway, sorry. I'm not sure. But yeah, when we found Savio, Fina just really wanted to rescue him. She understood that it may be dangerous to leave them any longer there. So she came up with a distraction plan and went all out, awakening her magic and combated with all the bandits. With Fina awakening and using very powerful magic, they were able to defeat all of the bandits before the security bureau arrived, in which Fina and Savio actually got to talk heart to heart with all the things that happened, got a chance to reconnect, and us as the player got to learn the truth of what happened in Fina's past. But I think what's the most important thing that came out from this story isn't necessarily about like Fina making friends or her reconnecting with Savio, but what I think ended up being the most important thing is that this entire story arc's narrative focuses on the characters of the kids of the new generation. Kids who are not yet indoctrinated by prejudice. Kids who do not look at the world in black and white and simply says Karens are evil because their parents told them to. But we saw both a generation of kids from the inner city and of the slums of Miss Aken interact with each other in a very civil manner and very caring towards each other as well. These kids see the humanity of another person rather than their race or their status. And I feel like this is kind of shaping out to really give hints that the Duet Night Abyss story is going to head towards a generation of the future where all this prejudice and all this like discrimination and all this stuff might actually come towards an end. And that is personally what I see from this small little heartwarming story, and it makes me very, very happy for the direction of it as well. Despite Duet Night Abyss being a story that like kind of teeters towards the gray area of morality and all that, it's still really nice to have that little bit of glimmer of hope, because if a story is just going to be like gray and grim dark without the hope at all, then the motivation of reaching that hope kind of isn't really there, and that also kind of diminishes the effects of how grim dark or like how gray the stories could be. So I think it's a really, really good thing that they added these kinds of small narratives for the story. And aside from that, as I've mentioned at the start of the video as well, I also have a few questions, which is, how exactly are Karan's abilities determined when they actually awaken them? How did Fina's magic kind of like manifest in ways of the fairy tales of sorts, which we know that Fina loves books, stories, and fairy tales, so it kind of does make sense. Or like even if we think back to Psyche loves flowers and she wanted to be free like a butterfly, you know, so she kind of gets like a butterfly-ish kind of abilities. I do wonder if there's like proper lore, or maybe I haven't read properly, but if there's any actual like lore about how Charons awaken their abilities and like, you know, the factors of what makes their ability manifest into certain things. It's something that's very interesting to me for the power system, and it's something I really do wish that the devs actually do expand on in the future. Or well, the writers, I should say. And yeah, this also makes me really curious about Fina's actual family and what exactly happened, because while we did kind of get answers, it was also kind of a little bit of like vague and ambiguous answers of sorts. A lot of the plot points are actually just more implied than actually being set in stone. So I'm gonna go see if there's actual answers in the character pages and /or the Sojourns of Time thing. Or if any of you know the answers, let me know in the comments, because I would love to find out more, and I would also love to know how all of you felt about this little story. I don't think narrative-wise it's anything too groundbreaking or special, but it's just told quite well, and I really like how it made me feel. And I think that's really important, because when it comes to stories, people can forget about these plot points and stuff, but what people won't forget is how stories made them feel. And that's also a large part why I love Duet Night Abyss' story. It feels quite grounded, it tackles a bit of like grey-ish or heavier kind of themes, and I personally really do feel things from the story. Of course there's things that can also be improved, such as like, you know, if this kind of story had like amazing presentation like Wuthering Waves 2.0++, you know, with like amazing cinematics, animations and all that, I think this would be insane. That being said though, the areas of the coloring quests, parts of the event thing where you go in the fairy tale books, has some really nice art direction, which I think is probably a bit of a preview of things to come in terms of architecture, art style, coloration, and all that stuff that we're going to see in the near future. And that's just about all my thoughts when it comes to Fina's story. I know I already said this, but I really want to know what all of you think, so let's discuss, shall we? I hope all of you enjoyed this video, and thank you so much for taking the time to watch all the way towards the end here. I would love to do more discussion videos of this kind, so if you want to see more, please let me know. Other than that, take care of yourself and don't forget to smile. I'll see you very soon.